Any of these merges we can do that look good. I don't really have context on Azure. Do either of you have any familiarity with this? Looks like we got one approval.
Not exactly sure
Mm-mm.
about.
Looks relatively okay, but I think I'm gonna wait for another approval. The folks in the Broadcom side are pretty locked up with a major IaaS migration,
Mhm.
which is probably going to be ongoing for the next maybe week or more.
Okay. Yeah, I can take a look at this one later.
Okay. And then this CI for this is, where is that? I think the CI is not in the, oh no, well, this Azure Storage CLI. Okay. Yeah, the, there are, it's going to be a while before we get this, the infrastructure transition done before we have pipelines up and running on the Broadcom side. So
Mhm.
probably also, even if we get approvals on this, it might take a while before we're able to get a release, just
Mhm.
as a heads up. Okay, where was I? Azure API. Okay, so we're leaving that there. GitHub Actions for lint. This was mine. Felix, thanks for the check mark there. I think these are mostly um, I'm trying to run through these and add just some basic GitHub actions so that we can get a little more safety for folks contributing, or especially for stuff that doesn't have CI in public.
Yeah,
Um,
makes sense. I think.
and a lot of these are just yeah, just lint. Most of the changes in the code is just lint fixes. So I'll probably wait with this one also and see if somebody picks up adds
Yeah.
another approval to that. This one, Go Cigar. This one's maybe a little more interesting, and if anybody has any Windows context on y'all's teams, it would be helpful. Um, the the tests on Windows 19 are failing uh, uh, in GitHub Actions. In our internal CI, I don't see failures running on Concourse with a Windows 2019 stem cell.
Hmm.
I haven't been able to investigate what differences there might be there. It could possibly be a Golang version difference because we don't have the auto detection and Golang install that GitHub Actions have.
Hmm.
So, but there may be something more obvious that I'm missing. So if any of you all have thoughts,
Not dealing
input
with
there.
Windows a lot,
Yeah,
or almost never, to be honest.
yeah, me either generally. So that over here. We'll leave that there. Let's see. Pop all these open. A lot of these are also mine. Factory config. Okay, we're still waiting for approvals on this. Um, Try to run that workflow and see if we get any feedback. Oh, that was very fast. Okay. No, there we go. Okay. At least we'll see that happening. Those folks are all still around, so I'm going to click that one out. Let's see, these are let's see. I'm not quite sure how we move between these things. My sense is we're still waiting for approvers before we move this to prioritized. Uh, does that gel with you all?
So you mean first it has to be approved to be brought to the pending merge, or?
I do, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess that's my question.
yeah, yeah. I would have also thought like that. I don't know why there's a prioritized
Yeah,
column, to be honest.
okay, that makes sense. All right, so we'll see that lint maybe finished. What is this one? Okay, this seems okay. I'm gonna leave this one until we have a bigger quorum. This is a larger change, and I'm not quite sure that um like I think the intent of this seems good, but I'm wondering if it's actually the right place to be sticking this feature of being able to validate upstream locations.
Mm.
It seems to conflate having a different blob store with having blob validation. Um,
Mhm.
um, we're still waiting. I am going to move Kenneth Lakin because he's no longer with the org.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was interesting. Um, cool. So we'll leave that one as is. We're still waiting for reviews. Um, I had some discussions internally about this. I'm actually going to mark my approval and put it in the um, put that into the next state. Oh, that automatically moves it for us. Okay, that's great.
Oh,
Um, that uh, this all seems probably good. Um,
yeah, that's from our
this is
team.
for the OpenStack. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. Could take a
Let
look
me
at
see.
this.
Yeah, let me see if there's anybody on here that is okay. We're still good. I'm gonna add. And Upton has a lot, probably the most Azure experience on our side, but um, like I said, we're a little strapped the
Mhm,
next couple
mhm.
of weeks, so it'll be probably slow going. Um, let's see, Ming is gone. Um, so background for you all, this definitely deserves some amount of thought. We have there exists in Ruby Gem, sorry. think that's the right URL. Um, so this exists. There is no independent repo for this. There has been for a long time a subgem in the Bosh director that contains a bunch of code which is not really sort of properly namespaced. Again, not all of it lives in a Bosh namespace, and it's used. Some of it what's currently in the Bosh director under the Bosh common directory is used only in the director, and some of the stuff in there is used by the Ruby CPI and by the other CPIs that are Ruby based. There's the
Hmm.
Ruby CPI base gem. So the the intent of this PR is to put everything that's consumed outside of the Bosh director into a more conventionally named Bosh-common
Hmm.
gem, and ultimately to move that code into its own repository, and have it like CI'd and versioned and automatically released. Currently, the release procedure appears to be some manual process, which possibly Joseph did in the past. I'm not sure, where a a version is manually like modified inside the repository, and the Ruby gem publish command is run manually. Because
Hmm.
internally in the code itself internally to the Bosh director has a version of 0.0.0, and there's no gem publication um,
Yes, I did
behavior.
come across that.
Yeah. Um, so the consequence of this, the consequence of this it would be a breaking change for anybody that consumes Bosh-common, but that's since there is a Bosh_common published, it would be a matter of the Ruby-based plugin, the Ruby-based CPIs eventually picking that up and then changing the way that they're calling those methods or that code. So the merge itself and the removal of Bosh-common to a separate repo won't actually break anyone directly, but no new updates would be received
Mm.
until people converted to this new um,
Yeah.
structure.
Okay.
Um,
But sounds useful to me in general.
yeah, yeah, I think it should hopefully make that a little easier. There's very little change in this part of the code base, um, but it seems like it's worth having it be something
Hmm.
that's available and uh, a little less opaque to people who aren't neck deep in the Bosh code base.
Hmm.
Okay, so leave that as is. Um, this is building the CITO. Um, yeah, so this is just another one of the dependency updates. Most of these were triggered by Dependabot trying to update the action, which um, updates to a 2.0 version of GoLang CI and fix everything.
Hmm.
Without these changes. This is maybe of interest to folks if anybody is using Windows with Go. This get attributes is necessary to get the Windows version of GoLang CI to parse correctly with the
Okay.
different line endings. Um, there, there's another these, yeah, another similar change. Some simplification in how we're running the tests in the scripts and otherwise. Mostly just a bunch of additions of no lint. Um, I think this was something we discussed last week. Yeah, this
Hmm.
breaks release update YAML, and we'll, I think, wait until we get uh, more info from that, and then we'll take Joseph off of here. See if we get anybody else. Congratulations, Felix.
Oh, me. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, take a look.
Cool. So there's another one of the lint ones. Take Ming off. Add another folks. Um, yeah. I didn't try tackling this for the new OpenStack Golang stuff, but feel free to copy that if that is helpful to you all. So
I
another
think
one
there
of the
have been GitHub Actions already for that.
yeah.
I'm not mistaken. Not sure.
Okay.
At least for the OpenStack CPI, yeah.
Nice. All right. So I think that covers the pending and that's another one of mine. All right. That's fine there. That one's also fine. We're good with those approvers. Um, this is interesting. So do you all have any context on this? Discussed this last time.
Yeah, as far as I understood, that you can somehow reserve VMs and assign them to some group, and then basically
Mm,
this would enable Bosch to pick VMs out of this pool of VMs, if I got it correctly.
okay. All right. So capacity reservation group. That makes sense. Let's take a quick look here. To figure out where to put the zoom window so I can actually see what I'm doing. Yeah, properties. Okay, so this is kind of just a straight pass through to the API, presumably.
Yeah.
Okay, that looks fairly reasonable. Um, again, until the CI world is back into that's interesting. Do we just not use that VM params here? I guess we didn't. Interesting.
Mm.
Um, and what is this now? Okay, so this is presumably a guard in case somebody provides the full information.
Not sure about the details of this, but I guess, yeah,
Yeah, it
something like
looks
that.
like we so there's two ways to pass that value in, or two types of values that are accepted, sort of
Yeah, yeah.
a bare version, and then somebody would have to pass the full URL. That seems uh, um, Mhm. So maybe there's a good reason for that to be passed
Mhm.
in two different ways, but maybe it's simpler for the code and for consumers if there's just one way of doing things.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm. Right. Okay. Interesting that we're putting corporate. Is it common for us to put internal, like company internal stuff in places like this? Seems a bit odd to me.
To me as well, but before it was pivotal. So
Yeah, I mean those are obviously very old,
yeah,
but
yeah.
um, the rest of this seems, yeah. I guess we probably don't need to care about Bionic. Um, where are we guys? Add that. Um, right. That. I'm curious what causes these things to move to pending. Is that something that we manually do? Uh,
This project? No.
yeah, doesn't seem like we've looked at it and we've assigned things.
Status info I have for this project. What it cannot be changed here,
Maybe
right?
is it label based? Let me take a look at this thing. Okay. I kind of thought I saw Joseph dragging and dropping things between them, but let me. Well, this might be a learning opportunity for me next time. Um, I'm not seeing a clear way, a clear difference between these two things that would.
But if you assign reviewers, it's automatically moved.
Yeah,
Does
that
not
was my
seem it is.
impression as well.
Uh,
We've got reviewers assigned, I think, to all of these. So I would have expected it to move from inbox. Reload this page. See if that fixes it. Well, that um, that exhausts my working knowledge of how to operate this thing. Is there anything else that you all
yeah, we have two things
have?
actually. So
Mm-hmm.
first one, I think you for sure can help, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
We created a change in the well, in the Ruby release,
Mm-hmm.
and it was merged. I think yesterday, and we wanted to ask if it's possible to create. Exactly.
Um,
This one that was merged by Ruben.
yeah.
And
I
this appears to solve some issue for us.
mhm.
So we wanted to ask if it's possible to create a new Azure CPI version and a new AWS CPI version. I'm not 100% sure how this works, but I guess somehow it's rendered into these
Yeah.
CPIs.
Yeah,
I
let's see what
think
we
they are
have
not.
here.
Yeah, we looked. Bosch AWS CPI is here. Okay.
Yeah.
The Azure
So we've
CPI we did not
been
find here, but yeah.
yeah, Azure CPI is not. That's unfortunately, and it looks like the Ruby package is not on here. So I think what I can do is I can prioritize, ask the team to prioritize moving the Ruby CPI out um, from the Broadcom managed concourse to open source. Um, and it may be worth, and this is maybe a conversation with Ruben or with, I'm not sure if there's somebody on your end who is more on the TOC or something, whether there is budget for us to move Azure into open source.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think historically Azure CPI has been handled by Pivotal VMware Broadcom because we've had access to subscriptions to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
there either hasn't been capacity or hasn't been budget to do that in open source.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but especially because we are a major consumer, but by no means like the biggest consumer of Azure, it would be probably good to get that into a place where folks outside of Broadcom can access and manage that.
Mm-hmm. So do
Um,
you know how this is, how the process done? It's just triggering the pipeline, like for example for AWS now, because for that we would also need a new version.
for
So I think
AWS,
this we can
yeah,
access this pipeline. So
this
this
you
is
should be able to
just,
access. So
yeah, this we can access. Yeah.
yeah, it should be promote and then automatically release new patch will happen if there are, I forget what the triggers are in here. If there are, yeah, so if there are patched CVEs, it will automatically release. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so there's this is all in the repo, so it's probably easier than me poking around just to go look at that. I think there is also a way to manually trigger. Um,
So
and I'm not,
yeah, there was a new
oh,
release 12 hours ago. Probably that
yeah,
incorporates.
yeah,
Great. Okay. I
yeah.
see.
Yeah, this may not have the package though, because unless we've released the
It says updates AWS CPI Ruby from 3.37 to 3.3.8.
oh, that's great. Um, yeah. Oh, it's not this
Weirdly,
bump.
there's
That's
also
it's
a
the
change
bump.
inside that it's already
Yeah.
3 weeks old, but
Oh, bump packages. This is the
pump Ruby package. Okay, probably this is a relevant one. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay,
So
for AWS, then we could have done it ourselves, and maybe then Azure will, is it happening also automatically?
Azure should also happen automatically. Unfortunately, because it's on RCI, it's being impacted by the kind of major uh the the infrastructure move that we're having to deal with right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's see if
This last one was
there's been any
last month.
active changes to support new concourse. Okay. Yeah. So this was about 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I this is the chances of this getting much motion in the near term is pretty low. I think it maybe up to a week before we're able to resurrect this pipeline. Unfortunately,
Okay.
um, uh,
A
I'll
way to
the
manually up bump the Ruby version? Is that too
I
much
mean,
effort?
yes, but there won't be CI, and then
Mm,
it's hard to sort of track that.
okay.
Um, I I will see about getting the Ruby package CI moved, if it isn't already, to the if it isn't already in flight, to get it moved out to the open source CI, and then um, unfortunately, the one person I'd be checking with about moving the actual Azure testing out to the Cloud Foundry CI would be
Mm-hmm.
Ruben, and he's on vacation for
Mm-hmm.
the next week or so.
Sure.
Um,
Okay.
if
Hell.
there's somebody that has connections to the foundational infrastructure group, maybe have them start that conversation, and feel free to reach out to me um, about how or whether that might be a possibility. I
Yeah.
I haven't had much direct contact with the CFF in a while, other than occasionally attending this meeting. Um, but yeah, so hopefully today or this week we can get the review package stuff moved out to the CF concourse. Um,
It's okay.
I think the Azure will be a harder lift.
Yeah,
But if
probably.
yeah,
Yeah, if we could get a new release fast as possible, it would be great, but of course it doesn't because our pipelines are currently blocked due to that. But
mm, yeah,
let's see. If it's a week,
uh,
then it's a week.
yeah. Um, I don't know, like it would be ugly, but there's an option for you all to maybe create an internal release and have a
Yeah,
put a patch on
yeah,
that,
maybe we'll
like
try to
put a
do
patch
that. Yeah,
version,
yeah,
and then just shift back to
yeah, yeah. You're
mainline.
right. That's what
Um,
we probably will do. Yeah,
yeah.
good
Hopefully we'll
hint.
be through with our move sooner than later.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Yeah, we will probably then just do a patch version. Yeah, just wanted to check on that. The
Yeah.
second question was regarding something different, and I don't know if you are the correct person to talk to, Aaram, but
Mm-hmm.
there's actually a draft PR from me in the Bosch repository. So the
Mm-hmm.
director, maybe we could quickly take a look
Yeah.
at that. So it is the last one, introduce prefix allocation. So there is an RFC that basically tries to apply dual stack basically for CF and in our
Mm-hmm.
use case for especially for the Diego cells. And one part of this was also a request to introduce prefix allocation to VMs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we discussed this last week as well. I had another PR in the AWS CPI.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussion came to the point where it says, probably it's better to have this in the networking section.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what this draft PR, it's not at all done or something, uh, does. So I would just have the question would be, would you think this approach is okay? Can we continue in this direction just from your opinion? Um, so basically what this introduces a new property in the networks cloud config
Mm-hmm.
section called a prefix.
Mm-hmm.
And it would also either introduce a new column in the database table. There's a
Mm-hmm.
database called IP addresses. It would be prefix, or we would change the address string entry in this table.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and basically this would enable Bosch to not in the create VM command, not send IP addresses, but send IP addresses with prefixes. As this is debugging stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I should not have pushed that. Yeah, but it's more a general question if you would think an approach like this is in general okay, or does something come to your mind what would directly make this
Yeah, I guess the
irrelevant?
first question is, do you see these IP prefixes being something that are applied to the VM or something that are consumed by Diego containers on the VM as sort of independent of the VM itself. I don't know if that question makes sense. Like this feels a little bit like a Diego cell
Mm.
property that has to be at the VM for some reason. Like if
Mm.
these prefixes were assigned to a container and that container were to be evacuated to some other place, would those prefixes need to move with that container, or would they? It's just like a pool of prefixes that Diego can consume on the VM? Is that maybe
Yeah,
more of a
that's
way to
more
think
the
about
thought. Exactly.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
That's how I understood the use case. So from Bosch side, basically it would mean to, yeah, attach this prefix or these many IP addresses to one VM. So yeah,
okay.
then
And that's
one for
happening, yeah, that's happening at the NIC level on the VM. Is that
exactly, yeah, to attach it
okay?
to a NIC then. And the yeah,
Okay.
my last week we had this approach where I just had this as a property in the manifest.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would be like, yeah, just attach AWS, just attach any prefix. So in this case,
Mm-hmm.
AWS. So leave the delegation to AWS. But then the feedback was, yeah, maybe it's better that Bosch has control over these prefixes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I started to going ahead with this approach and putting a new property into the cloud config, having this prefix.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, basically it yeah, basically it would give Bosch control over these IP addresses. It knows which IP addresses or also with prefixes are assigned to which VM.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it would be more general if something comes already to your mind, what would I say disqualify this approach already, or you if maybe also later something comes to mind, but yeah, I just wanted to ask for maybe some feedback on this general
Yeah,
approach, if it
I
goes more
think
in the right direction or
that makes sense to me on one level. I think there's a part of it that feels so generally with IP addresses, the notion is that um yeah, so yeah, I'm wondering if
so. This would
yeah,
instead of assigning IP, I mean IP addresses in general always have kind of a prefix. If it's a single
hmm
IP, then for example IPv4 it
yeah,
would be /32,
hmm
obviously. So this approach would, yeah, or this would just say, okay, instead of assigning single IP addresses, if a instance group refers this network, instead of
hmm
doing slash, okay, this is for IPv6, so instead of doing /128 prefix, which could be
hmm
considered as a default, do a /80. Um, yeah, that's
yeah,
basically what I thought. Then you could also
yeah,
still have this concept of static IPs and still could reserve IPs and everything. Um, yeah.
yeah. Um, that makes sense. I guess the thing that I'm wondering, so this has got an AZ and then is is this this is a network setup. This is a network naming thing, right? Not an instance group, right? Am I Is this meant to be an instance group config or a network?
Sorry, I could not hear anything for a couple of. It says my internet connection is unstable. Sorry, I missed your
Yeah, that's
last
okay.
30 seconds.
Somebody else just dropped.
Yeah.
Is you said this is a cloud config? Is this meant to be an instance group this definition, or is
This is
this
in the
a
cloud config. It's basically a networks definition.
networks definition? Okay, that
Hmm.
makes more sense. For some reason,
Yeah. Sorry, I
because
should
my
have
yeah
uh, cut it
yeah
off
my
the
brain
example there. Yeah.
yeah no my brain was like thinking this was an instance group thing, and then I got confused. I think I think this makes sense. I'm wondering if um think the biggest thing I'm wondering is if we want to distinguish networks by type so that we can networks can have a unique name slash IPv6 version combination rather than having networks that are internally either IPv6 or IPv4. Um, and if we then want to make it so that for an instance, like an instance group can be assigned to to more than one, can be assigned to more than one of those networks. So it can be either be assigned to an IPv6 or an IPv4 network. Um, or do we want to just make it so that an instance group is only in one or the other? Does that make sense? Maybe my video's cut out again, my audio.
Hi, Aaram. Sorry, can you hear me?
Hey, Felix, welcome back.
Oh, sorry. I don't know.
Okay,
Sorry. So I missed the last 5 minutes or something.
that's quite all right. I'm just here talking to myself on the recording. Um, uh, I guess, yeah, so I think the thing I was wondering was whether, I mean, I think this as a description of an IPv6 network makes sense. I wonder if possibly it makes sense to expand the notion of a network in Bosch to have a type on it rather than relying on the sort of internal numeric
Mm,
notation.
mhm.
Um,
So you mean having something specifying the network as IPv4 or IPv6?
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it's a good point. I think previously I saw also, so Bosch, I think, is already able to handle IPv6.
hmm, okay, yeah,
And
I haven't looked at that.
I saw some coding where the differentiation actually is done. It checks the IP address and sees is there a colon inside or not, and then
Okay,
it
so
says
it just makes a
IPv6.
decision. Yeah, that vaguely
Uh,
rings a
Based
bell.
on that, yeah, yeah.
Um, okay. Um, yeah, I haven't thought too much about networking in a while.
Hmm.
Do would there be a world in which we want to be able to assign a VM to two networks? And for us to be able to,
Actually, that's the goal we have as well.
yeah.
So, yeah, there would be two networks.
Mm-hmm.
So the instance group would specify two networks. In this case, it would be one IPv4 network and one IPv6
Mm-hmm.
prefix network. But that already works actually.
Okay.
So Bosch passes that through to create VM, and then the CPI basically can do whatever it wants with that information,
Whatever
more or
it wants
less.
to the division. Okay.
So, for example, AWS was not doing much with that with the second network. It was only considering the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but actually, Bosch was able to is able to handle I think an undefined number of networks or unlimited. But yeah,
Right.
question is why would you want to
Why
do
would you
that?
want
Yeah,
to do that many? Yeah.
yeah,
Well, you could do one instead of doing reserved ranges, you could do instead of prefixes, you could do one network per prefix, and then seems great, right? Just
yeah.
kidding.
Something that you also possible. Yeah, also possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But
I think
I don't. Yeah, I just thought it might be a good place just to ask quickly. Maybe Yeah, if
Yeah,
there's any. So of course, I don't expect you to deeply know about all of the stuff. So yeah, but yeah,
yeah.
if nothing comes to your mind that yeah,
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, this is partially me not having been in the networking code in a good 6 months, and partially being early on my side of the world.
yeah,
I
sure,
think
sure.
a priori this looks reasonable. I think putting this into here
Mm,
would would make sense. Um, Representing it as just another network seems reasonable. Um,
yeah, I thought of about that, so it kind of fits in like to the current structure, right? So
yeah,
Bosch
yeah.
assigns always one IP per network.
Hmm. Yeah,
So in that case, it would just assign one prefix, and you could consider, okay, if you don't specify a prefix as it was done previously before this property,
hmm.
then it would just be a default /32 or /128 prefix. So that's
Right.
how I thought about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess the one thing that my brain's tripping up, and I
Mhm.
apologize because I'm not super familiar with IPv6, is like whether we would want, or is it such that in IPv6 when you assign a prefix, then the networking stack on the VM just effectively claims an entire subnet for itself? Um,
Yeah, that's something that would still need to be done. Yeah, so this
okay.
is currently, yeah, I guess the code is so far not really usable or anything,
Yeah.
but that is it. Yeah, it was just if the idea of how Bosch should handle this is okay, and then you're right, the Bosch
Yeah.
agent would need to be adapted. Obviously, CPIs would need to be adapted. Um, but before going ahead with that inside the team, I just thought I'd ask here for feedback on this general approach. Of course,
Yeah.
yeah, as you mentioned, would have to be a lot of adaptations to the agent, maybe also in the stem cell, not sure. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously also in the CLI, because I think the CLI can only show IP address, but not sure about that. Maybe it can also
Yeah.
display prefixes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of this makes sense. I think there's a part of my brain, and maybe it's because I'm not totally familiar with IPv6, about the idea of
Mm-hmm.
assigning of Bosch assigning a thing that's a sort of VM level concern that is um that isn't a specific IP.
Mm-hmm.
Um I don't okay like it I think what I'm imagining in my head is that if this were disk as opposed to network, it seems like Bosch giving a VM uh, a reference to a storage pool rather than mounting a specific disk on a VM.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought is
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's not the somehow that's like not the right level of abstraction. That that the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but it might this might just be a like a lack of imagination on my part about how IPv6 how it makes sense to manage IPv6 addresses.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, this prefix, you can also imagine it in the IPv4 if it's easier, but because
mhm.
it should also be applicable for IPv4, and there it should just be
Right.
32
So
or
you could
something
give it a
less. Yeah.
okay.
But yeah, actually, you're right. So what would have to think about what happens if someone only assigns a prefix network to a VM, then it only has a yeah bunch
Yeah,
of IP.
like is
How
the
does
VM,
Bosch then
yeah, is the VM,
communicate? Yeah.
yeah, how does the Bosch communicate to it?
Uh,
Is the VM supposed to self-assign one of those addresses? Um,
mm-hmm.
I don't like mostly networks are about Bosch telling the agent how to configure the NIC so that the VM can come up and have an
Mm,
IP which it can use to
exactly.
communicate to the rest of the world. But
Yeah.
this is more like a resource provisioning, and
Mm,
I'm uh like in on like
yeah.
from one perspective it makes a lot of sense for it to be in networks, and from another perspective it seems
Yeah.
strange, like you say, if
Mm,
somebody were to give a network that only had a prefix to a VM, then the
mm,
responsibility of who assigns the IP address and how Bosch understands that, um
yeah.
is a
Yeah,
little
that's exactly
confusing.
right. That's why also I had this PR last week because yeah, it's not really this prefix is not really necessary for Bosch to work. Um,
Yeah.
it works with single IP addresses. Um, yeah, I mean we could introduce some error message or something that yeah only attaching a prefix is not possible to a VM, but
Hmm.
yeah, mm, not too sure. But one thing that also speaks for this that it should be able to assign is a prefix that you can assign multiple networks to a VM.
Hmm.
I guess Bosch always only needs one. It would only needs one IP address.
Yeah.
Um, but you could still assign multiple.
Yeah. Yeah, that idea
Yeah,
makes
so
sense.
mm,
I guess I'm wondering if there's a second concept which is kind of lurking in here that we're
mhm,
collapsing between the network on which a VM must have a particular IP address so that Bosch can communicate with it, and some other type of network resource that the
mm,
instance could be given, um, out of which it can self-allocate
mm,
things.
exactly. Yeah.
Uh, I don't have a good answer for that, but
Okay.
that's the um,
Okay. Yeah, maybe
but
we
I,
have
I
to make this example. Maybe I have to create it more a bit more sophisticated and set up some
yeah,
tests. Maybe
yeah,
also with the
yeah. I think that could be interesting to see. But
yeah.
yeah, I think this is definitely an interesting start, and like, yeah, I think probably more exploration, and then
Okay.
maybe it'll become more clear that there
Yeah.
is some other
Yeah.
concept in here lurking that we really want to extract to a separate thing, or that it does fit well in this model.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And then my last question would be, if you still have 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Regarding this IP address entry, because I also spoke to an internal colleague. So there is this IP address table in Bosch. I don't know, maybe you never did you ever took a look in it?
I haven't looked lately, but
Okay. It doesn't matter too much. So there's a address string column, basically where it stores the IP address.
hmm
But the IP address is not actually in an IP address format. It's
hmm
in the integer representation.
Yes, I vaguely
And
remember that.
yeah, and so with this integer representation, you basically lose the prefix. So my approach was putting in the second column, but then the colleague approached me and said maybe it makes sense to instead Bosch saving the integer representation database, we should directly save the IP address.
Hmm.
I could not find really a reason why it was done in integer representation. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
so I just thought maybe that would also be an approach, and yeah.
yeah, I think that's very much an option. Uh,
Hmm.
I think, is it this
Yeah,
table?
yes, it's this table exactly.
Um,
Exactly, it's this address string, and it basically is a string,
uh,
but first converted to integer, and then later
yeah,
it will be saved as a
yeah.
string of integer.
Um, yeah, the last time I was in this world, I did a lot of work around, um, that was not a, thanks, thanks GitHub. That was not exactly what I wanted to do, but it was very close. Um, this this code, I think there is a lot of there's a lot of uh, so first of all, yeah, that's probably okay. I think the one thing you might run into is there are a lot of places where we do this kind of a conversion,
Hmm.
like to and from, and it's very
Hmm.
hard to know in the code.
Hmm.
I think I tried to fix this to some degree, but it's often very hard to know when you're
Hmm.
in the code whether the thing that you're dealing with that's called an IP address is an integer representation or the like a CIDR notation or not. And I think
Exactly.
there if you do end up going through this, it probably makes sense to maybe disambiguate what's being passed around a little bit more.
Hmm.
Um, but I think probably that's fine. I think some of the one of the things you may run into is that there's some places where we do some bit shift math on this thing that will make it
Hmm.
hard to like you'll have to make sure all those conversions happen at the right place. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's
Yeah. Yeah,
probably
the only
okay.
reason I could think about it being stored as an integer was that the sorting is a bit easier to find the next available one. That's only
Yeah,
also I could that's the only place, but that you could also do in the code once you need it, and it would make storing the prefix a lot easier.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that
so
makes sense.
okay, okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably good. I that might actually be a really interesting refactor to do completely
Mm-hmm.
separate from the IPv6 stuff, because that
Mm-hmm.
would
Yeah.
probably give you a really in-depth tour of the IP subsystem and the networking,
Mm-hmm.
which might let you find let you discover some rough edges that will have to be addressed with IPv6.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um,
Okay, great.
yeah,
Yeah, then thank you very much, Aaron, for all the input.
yeah, you're super
It was
welcome.
great help.
Yeah, very much. I'm not sure what happens with the recording. I don't know if you started that or if that's just automatically
It
happening.
was running already when I joined.
Okay, so yeah, maybe we're all just internet famous now.
There's this agenda. I don't know if we have to maintain that. I can't, actually.
I have no idea where that is.
I
So
put it
maybe
in the
we'll.
chat. It's this Google
Ooh,
Docs
I think maybe I got
thing,
lost.
but
Okay.
uh,
See if I have access. Ooh, I have access to it.
oh, yeah, maybe I have to.
Um, okay. That seems good.
I don't know if that's mandatory, but it's just
Yeah.
uh,
I can go ahead and fill this out. And I will. Let me actually see if I can share this with you. Um,
I guess I will have to check with Behan if it's even possible because I think I cannot log in with
okay.
my company account at least. At least it doesn't
Okay.
allow me to use Google Docs. So yeah,
Cool.
I
Yeah.
check with
Maybe check
Behan
with
how to do
Behan.
that.
See
Yeah,
what they. Okay. I'll
yeah.
fill this out with the attendees, and then we'll
Thank you very much.
just call it. Yeah. You're welcome.
Great.
Um, have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.